Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. This week, we talk with a poet about his new collection titled If Lost. He found inspiration for it by walking around in the woods.
And there was a map of the area that actually said, if lost, ? And then it just said, go downhill. And so that kind of started the whole idea of these sayings that people have for what to do if lost.
Now is a great time for mushroom hunters to head to the woods and find all kinds of fascinating fungi, even those not meant to be eaten.
Do you touch it with your fingers? It feels really cool. It's like Jell-O.
And almost everybody has a favorite cup or coffee mug. But how far would you go to replace yours?
So this turned into like a real life quest where each little vendor or shop I went to, they would each give you like a little piece of the story.
You'll hear these stories and more this week inside Appalachia. Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. Living in the mountains means sometimes you just have to make do. And so when Clint Bowman of Black Mountain, North Carolina, couldn't find the writing group he needed, he formed one. It's called the Dark City Poet Society. Bowman has used the group to develop his poetry, some of which explores people and their connection to nature. Producer Bill Lynch recently spoke with Bowman about his new collection, If Lost.
Would you like to read something?
I was going to read basically the title poem for the whole book. So if lost, it happens at the very end, but I feel like it kind of captures the collection pretty well. So I'll read If Lost. Look around, establish your bearings. Take note of the scratched hemlock where the trail turns south. Don't rely on wives' tales or the growing patterns of moss. Notice nature warn itself of your intrusion. That warbler isn't singing to you. It's alerting the bear around the bend. Know your way out so you can tell someone lost one day. Go downhill if disarrayed. Act like water. Don't be afraid.
Tell me about that poem, which also kind of leads into the whole idea of the collection, which is broken into three parts, right? You've got establish your bearings, notice nature, don't be afraid. About that poem and then kind of branch into the collection.
So the whole idea of it actually originally came to me whenever there's maps all over. I had to go out hiking a ton, and I do it a lot for my job and just for on my spare time as well. And there was a map of the area that actually said, if lost, ? And then it just said, go downhill. And that was all they said. And so that kind of started the whole idea of these sayings that people have for what to do if lost. And so then I ran with that idea and put together If Lost, the poem, throwing in things like the wives' tales and the moss and the way that moss grows on trees and to go downhill and act like water. I kind of wanted to loop that all back into how everyone, I feel like, is lost in some way. The book is split up into three different sections. Each section is a line from this poem. So you have establish your bearings. And so that kind of sets the setting of the book and really brings the reader kind of into the place of where If Lost takes place, which is heavily influenced by where I currently live in Black Mountain and where I grew up in Davidson County, which is closer to the Piedmont region of North Carolina. And so you kind of get the setting through establish your bearings. And then in section 2, notice nature, I try to do a lot more parallels between kind of like human suffering and environmental suffer and how everything and everyone is kind of lost in some way. And then the don't be afraid in section 3 kind of brings it all full circle and saying, you're probably not as lost as you think you are, and just stay calm and don't be afraid and you'll be on your way, basically. I kind of use that as the framework for the whole poem and try to keep it very simple on those 3 steps to take if you're lost, metaphorically or physically. I put it at the end just kind of as a way to kind of bring it all full circle.
The characters in your poems, some of them are in very harrowing circumstances there, which made me wonder about how you were actually.
Yeah, I think a lot of the characters, inspired by interactions I've had with people growing up and people that I currently know. Yeah, I think a lot of people do some incredible feats sometimes, and you kind of have to do certain things to find yourself or to find some sort of path of safety in a way. I have a poem in there I think it's titled Mountain Man, from like a grandfatherly standpoint of him knowing all the bear hunters and knowing all the illegal ginseng poachers and stuff like that. I feel like he's one of those characters that I kind of look up to in the book. And then there's a lot of different characters basically, but yeah, they've got to do a lot of different things to get through life.
Talk a little about your writing life and how that connects with the rest of your life.
Yeah. So I really started writing poetry in high school. One of my English teachers, I really just latched onto poetry because I'm not a really strong reader. I started really diving into poems and dissecting them for papers and projects and getting into it that way. And then went to college, took a few classes in poetry, didn't major in it, went to college for Parks and Recreation because I wanted to be outside. And so I never really lost track of it. But then out of college, that's when I started forming community poetry groups. My first job was with an arts council. I formed a community poetry group through them. And that was completely free, open to all ages. That was when I really first started connecting with real writing mentors who helped me in my writing and had a major impact on the way that I write and edited my work. And then once I moved to Black Mountain a little over 5 years ago, I really missed that community poetry group. I looked for one here that was very similar to the one that I had started, in the fact that it was free and open and had a regular schedule. And so maybe once or twice a month doing something. And I didn't find anything specifically in Black Mountain, which I found surprising because Black Mountain has a very rich poetry and artistic history. And so I partnered with the library here to create the Dark City Poet Society. That group has taken off like crazy, and it's in all the good ways. But we are a very large group, and it has had even a bigger impact on my work in writing because we do one critique a month and one poetry reading a month. And the feedback that I get from all these incredible writers has helped me a ton. I'm definitely indebted to them in a lot of ways, and I definitely give them a lot of credit for where my writing is because I wouldn't be here without their support, really.
Writing is often seen as a solitary exercise.
Mm-hmm.
But what about community? How important is community to writers?
Yeah, I think it's vital to writers because, I mean, being in a community allows you to feel heard and supported and not so alone or not as crazy as you think you are. We get so many people coming into our groups who are afraid of sharing, which is natural. And, they don't have to share if they don't want to at either meeting, either the critique or the reading. They don't have to share at all. They can just sit and listen if they'd like. But eventually they hear enough of other people's work and they're like, oh, yeah, my poetry is not that crazy. Like they hear other people's stories and the things that they live through, and they see the courage that it takes through those people to share, and they kind of slowly gain up the courage to do it themselves. And so I think it really helps to branch out. I'm an introverted person in a very extroverted role, if that makes sense. But I have to do it to get out of my shell and to learn from others because it's helped me tremendously. So I've got to do it.
You mentioned you have a day job that keeps you outside. What do you do?
So I'm a recreation coordinator, and so I do a lot of outdoor programming, hikes, and river cleanups, and removing invasive species, which plays a big role in the book If Lost. Kind of the ways that our ecosystem suffers and in ways that are directly and indirectly influenced by us. And then on top of the outdoor programming, I also do special events. We do like a concert series that I'm in charge of, and some holiday events as well.
Sounds like a pretty busy life. What do you do in your spare time?
I'm writing and reading in my spare time, and then going on hikes with out groups and going swimming in some swimming holes.
You mentioned being kind of an introvert. So tips for other introverts who want to read poetry out loud.
My biggest tip would be to read out loud to yourself and get used to the sound of your voice and just getting used to reading out loud. It sounds a little weird, but I read out loud basically every morning. I'm used to hearing my voice and then going out and just getting experience because it's different reading to yourself and then getting behind a mic and hearing it reverberate back to you a little bit. So it takes a lot of practice to get used to that. And I still stumble so much on it, and it scares the crap out of me every time I get up behind a mic. So I've gotten a little bit more used to it. I realize it's not, do or die anymore.
The poems you read every morning, is it your own work or do you read other poets?
Oh, definitely other poets, not my own work for sure. I'll maybe do some edits if I feel led to, but mostly reading just kind of some of my favorite poets. A lot of Sharon Olds and Gary Snyder, and a little bit of like old poetry as well with like Walt Whitman. And yeah, just kind of reading more of the poets that I look up to.
The book is called If Lost by Clint Bowman. Clint, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
If Lost is available from Loblolly Press. The fall tends to be a great time to hunt mushrooms in Appalachia. You might see orange, yellow, red, even blue mushrooms. A few are edible, but some are poisonous, and it's best not to pick them unless you know what you're doing. If you're curious but unsure, there are guided mushroom hikes where experts help people learn to identify the different types. Radio IQ's Roxy Todd joined a hike in southwestern Virginia.
It's been raining on and off all night, and the mountains are misty as 13 of us gather in Jonesville to begin the day. This is prime weather for mushrooms.
I love coming out here. It's something that takes my brain in a different direction than my day-to-day life. So
Elizabeth Cooperstein is a doctor by day. She's partly retired and spends some of her free time volunteering with Friends of the Cedars, which organize this mushroom hike. This land, which used to be overrun by cedar trees, is called the Cedars Natural Area Preserve. Most people call it the Cedars. Laura Young manages this forest, and part of her job is doing prescribed burns.
So this is actually only a couple of months after a fire, and you can see how much there's already vegetation that's, knee to waist high out here. There's mushrooms coming up everywhere.
Young works for the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation and says mushrooms thrive after a fire. Other native plants do too. As we head into the forest, Cooperstein describes what it was like here before they began doing prescribed burns.
it was very much overgrown with underbrush. As you can see, there's a lot of dead brush here. This part has been burned, and then the part on the other side of the trail has not been burned.
We begin to see all kinds of mushrooms of various shapes and colors. One hiker, Aaron Mazuelos, points out a shimmering clear one called a jelly fungus.
Do you touch it with your fingers? It feels really cool. It's like Jell-O.
There are seniors and small children on this slowly meandering hike. Young says it's not so much about burning calories as slowing down and looking at what's growing.
You get to see it in person, and there's a lot of value in that.
Adam Boring from Big Stone Gap is leading this walk. He explains mushrooms grow underground, so the part we see is just a piece of what's growing beneath our feet.
Nope, not hurting the mushroom if you pick it. The mushroom itself is the fruiting body, so think of it kind of like the apple on the apple tree.
Boring is a mental health therapist in his day job, but he spent the past several years learning how to correctly identify mushrooms. He shows us one bright blue mushroom called an indigo milkcap. Laura Young hands my daughter one red and white mushroom called a russula.
Do you want to throw one that will explode? If you
Throw it at a tree?
Throw it at a tree hard.
As my daughter throws it at the tree, it bursts into a dozen small pieces.
You want to see something?
Wearing a wide-brimmed hat and using a walking stick, Ronnie Branham says this is the first time he's been at the Cedars. He lives in nearby Dickinson County.
I'm a hiker, so I hit the trails just about everywhere. But I've been mushroom hunting before now, but I don't know a lot about them, so I'm trying to learn.
Teaching people what's in the forest is part of why this group organizes events like this, explains Cooperstein.
A lot of people here spend time in the outdoors because they hunt or they farm or whatever. But one of the things we like to try to do is to get people to see more of the perspective of what the benefit of having a wild place is.
They also host butterfly walks and salamander hikes, events that help show how prescribed burning and other restoration efforts are helping bring more plants and animals back to this forest. In Lee County, I'm Roxy Todd.
Coming up, a quest for a coffee mug more than a decade in the making. You're inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, focusing on students' futures. Classes available at concord.edu/apply.
Inside Appalachia's folkways stories cover a lot of ground. They're about passing knowledge between people, and they're also about community and connection. And sometimes, a folkways story can be about something that was lost and then found. Folkways reporter Wendy Welch brings us this about the mystery behind a specific mug.
Once upon a time, there was a girl named Ashley who loved unicorns.
I have been a unicorn fanatic since I was a little girl. My favorite movie in the world growing up was The Last Unicorn, and I really feel like unicorns for me symbolize hope.
Growing up in Northern Virginia, Ashley went to the Maryland Renaissance Fair every year with her family.
We couldn't afford to buy things at the Renaissance Fair. So you go every year and you go, I'm going to grow up and become an adult and have adult money and spend it here.
At age 17, Ashley landed her dream job, working in a bookstore. When her first paycheck arrived, she set it aside for the fulfillment of another dream.
I had cash from my job at the bookstore, and I could go spend it at the Renaissance Fair.
Ashley circled the entire fair twice before choosing.
And I bought this blue speckled mug with a braided handle, and it had a little unicorn in it that was sitting in it looking up, and it had crossed legs and cloven hoofs and, just very detailed mane and hair, and it was unique.
Ashley heeded the warnings not to let her mug straddle a pin inside a dishwasher. She took good care of the little unicorn, and it accompanied her to college a couple of years later.
I remember the computer screen light hitting the mug and while I was typing up my reports, and it's just something that I like having next to me when I am writing.
Her junior year, Ashley acquired a roommate, a nice guy who did dishes. One day, he put Ashley's unicorn mug in the dishwasher over a pin.
And when I pulled it out, the whole thing just kind of broke apart into pieces and flew across my kitchen.
Her roommate promised to replace the mug when they went to the fair next year. But when they got there,
the shop was gone.
Ashley could remember the shop's location at the fair site, but not the name. She began asking vendors about the place that sold mugs.
So this turned into a real-life quest where each little vendor or shop I went to, they would each give you a little piece of the story.
This is where the story travels back in time a couple of decades, and from Maryland to Ohio. That's where Ange Campbell first took up making mugs as a hobby.
I was a quiet and well-behaved suburban housewife. I was living in the city of Dayton back in the 1980s. And the city of Dayton Parks and Recreation Department, Fine Art and Crafts Center, offered pottery.
Ange fell in love with the sound of the wheel and the feel of the clay.
And there's a point when everything sings and you get the clay centered and it's not fighting you and you're literally listening to the clay with your hands. You can do it with your eyes shut. And everything just flows together and it's a wonderful, fluid, almost meditative tactile experience. And it just makes my heart happy. When I hit that zone, when everything flows, it's like a prayer. That is the point at which work is prayer. And everything you are and everything you have experienced ends up in that clay somehow, some way.
Ange took third place in the Riverbend Art Show. People began noticing her talent. A local artist approached. Did Ange want to join him selling mugs on the Renaissance Fair circuit? Ange wanted to, but she knew her work would have to stand out in a literal crowded field.
So I started including drinking companions. Yes, drinking companions, because everybody and his brother will make a mug. But mine come with someone you can talk to who will never, ever ask you for money.
The little unicorn that captured Ashley's heart was part of a long parade of mythical mug-dwelling creatures.
There are dragons, some of whom are grumpy, some of whom are pleasant, some of whom are downright curious as to why you're drinking their bath water. There are unicorns, mermaids, fairies, fauns. Anything that people can think of ends up in a mug. That way you will always have someone to drink with you and you will never spend the morning alone.
Fairgoers loved the whimsical practicality of Ange's work. Her mugs flew off the shelves.
A few years into it, my then-husband pointed out that I could make at least as much money making and selling pottery as I was making at a retail job. and he was right.
Ange and her artistic partners began circuit riding to Renaissance fairs around the country. Occasionally, she got to put on medieval garb and an Irish accent to banter with customers. But usually, Ange was backstage somewhere working the clay.
It was a case of literally hauling the wheel and the kiln around with us so that when I was based somewhere, I would have the opportunity to work.
Sales were great until the 1990s recession hit. As sales slowly dried up, Ange and her husband divorced, and she made a difficult decision.
The pottery just wasn't going to be making enough money to allow me to continue to depend on that as my sole income. So given a choice between continuing to live indoors and enjoy the immense pleasure of running water and heat and light, I stopped potting full-time and started working again.
Ashley didn't know it, but she bought her unicorn mug the last year Ange sent her wares to the Maryland Fair.
I worked in the photo lab at Walmart, worked in the pharmacy at Walmart, worked as an alcohol and substance abuse addictions counselor.
Ange moved to Lancaster, Ohio, without husband or kiln, and soon pottery became part of her past life.
It seemed I never had enough time or energy simultaneously to go and get the shop set up and make the trip out there to continue to try to work on the pottery. So up until a couple of years ago, I wasn't potting anymore. I was just working. But then something very strange happened.
COVID hit. The American Renaissance Fair community set up a Facebook page so artists could sell their creations online during the lockdowns. That's how Ashley, now living in Virginia with a husband and 2 children, figured she could finally replace her beloved unicorn. She hopped online to restart her search.
All of a sudden, I had access to vendors that were all across the country. I put out the request, I described the mug. I think I got like over 300 comments.
Including from Bill, the artist who had suggested the Ren Fair circuit to Ange all those decades before. Bill was no longer Ange's business partner, but he was her friend and neighbor. Bill told Ashley how to find Ange.
I got contacted out of the blue by an absolutely delightful young lady, Ashley Nolan, who explained to me that she had been trying for more than 10 years to find me.
And she just couldn't believe that I'd been looking for her for like a decade.
Ashley's search had made Ange famous in the online Ren Fair community. People who owned one of Ange's mugs were proudly posting photos and turning down offers doubling the original purchase price. People who didn't have one were demanding details on how to place an order.
And she had to go on her own journey and her own quest.
Ange sat a few months with the news that someone had been looking for her that hard, that long, wanting what she had made that much. Her kiln was in a faraway outbuilding at a friend's farm, covered with dust and a tarp. She had no idea where her clay mojo was. But she liked Ashley, and she remembered the times the clay sang in her hands.
And I got my stuff from my friend who had been keeping everything stored in her barn.
Her friend Bill let her set it all up in his garage.
Bill put in the wiring, and we got the kiln running, and I started pottering again.
Ange fired off a series of unicorn mugs. She also shaped dragons, cats, hedgehogs, and myriad other drinking companions for the community now clamoring for her work. But Ange made sure the first unicorns went to Ashley, who ordered 1 mug for each member of her family.
Like the day before Christmas, I think, is when I got the package in the mail.
Ashley had told Ange about her children, her son Jerome's passion for red, her daughter Cordelia's favorite book, Honey Bunny. Ange sent a child-sized mug holding a cheerful waving bunny.
And 2 mugs for my son, and with his favorite color red that had different dragons in it. It was fabulous. It was Christmas before Christmas.
Oberon, the son who joined Ashley's family in 2023, will be getting his own mug soon.
Having her create again it felt amazing to be part of that journey and part of her journey too.
Ange and her kilns still live in Lancaster. 5 days a week she works in an office helping people rent apartments, and on the 6th day, she creates things. Ange no longer depends on pottery for her living, which means she can experiment with designs.
I can drag out those notebooks from 40 years ago when my husband would look at a sketch I'd come up with and say, "You can't do that now. You'll never sell it for the price it'll be worth. it'll take up too much of your time. Forget that. So, yes, I still have all those notebooks from 40 years ago. And yes, now I'm getting to play with those.
I'm just so glad she came back to it. She didn't realize how much her art could mean to someone else.
Ashley takes her children on a camping trip to the Maryland Renaissance Fair every summer. She believes the quest of the broken mug put a lot of things back together through the power of community and the joy of art. Ashley got her mug back. Ange got her mojo back. And we got this story. For Inside Appalachia, I'm Wendy Welch.
That story is part of our Folkways reporting project, which covers arts and culture in our region. You can find more Folkways stories about marbles, spoon playing, workhorses, and more. They're at our website, wvpublic.org. The coal industry has had a tough few decades. There are a lot of reasons for coal's decline, but there is no question it's been accelerated by the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign. Beyond Coal aimed to promote renewable energy by shutting down coal-fired power plants. For a decade, Marianne Hitt led that campaign. She stepped down from the job 3 years ago. Now she's senior director at Climate Imperative Foundation. WVPB's Curtis Tate spoke with Hitt about the state of coal in West Virginia.
You said you left the Sierra Club in 2021. What changes have you seen since then?
A couple of big changes that come to mind. One is we have had this concentrated period of all of these rate increases from AEP and First Energy that have really been tied to how much coal the state is insistent on using. And so I think that the public frustration with that has kind of reached a peak that I hadn't seen before. I mean, I think it's, multiple rate increases over just a couple of years. And now our electric bills are going up faster than almost any other state in the country. And so I think, seen for really the first time people really questioning whether it's in our financial interest for our families and for our state to just keep being insisting that we're going to burn so much coal and refusing to diversify our energy mix. So that's one thing that I feel like is changing. Another thing that's changed is we've had the Inflation Reduction Act pass, and that has created an incredible amount of new opportunity here in the state for clean energy. I think there's, by one measure, over 5,000 new clean energy jobs in the state here in West Virginia. There's also all of these programs for, supporting coal communities as they make an economic transition. I've heard some economic development folks in the state call it a once in a generation opportunity to really reinvest in making West Virginia part of the 21st century energy economy.
Is any of the state's policy trying to stymie clean energy?
Right now here in West Virginia, there are a lot of hurdles and roadblocks for clean energy. We just have seen over the last few months, the big utilities have tried to reduce it's called net metering. They have tried to reduce what kind of financial benefit you can get from having solar on your rooftop. And so as we are in a time when we need more energy and we need that energy to be clean, we have our utilities here in West Virginia that are trying to make it harder to build clean energy in the state. And that is certainly the wrong direction to be going. So yes, we are going to be grappling with this need for more electricity, at a time of a climate crisis and at a time when we're all dealing with the effects of air and water pollution. Let's try to make that as much of that energy clean as possible. And so let's not go in the opposite direction here in West Virginia and try to make it harder, especially for people to put solar on their rooftops and to have more clean energy in the state.
The EPA has issued new, tougher standards for power plants, and they've been challenged in court. Where do you see that going?
The coal plant operators are never happy about those stronger pollution standards because it requires them to make financial investments in those plants to clean them up. But we have some of the dirtiest coal plants in the country here in West Virginia from both an air pollution and a water pollution standpoint. And so these are just common sense public health safeguards to deal with the air pollution and the water pollution from these coal plants that West Virginians have been dealing with for too long. They are, of course, being challenged in the courts now. Every single EPA pollution standard is The industry is running right to the Supreme Court if they can to try to get them to intervene. But I think the reality is these EPA standards that are, again, dealing with this, air and water pollution are really common sense kind of bread and butter, EPA doing its job of protecting public health. And so while they might be challenged in the courts, I think they'll ultimately be upheld, and that will result in cleaner air and water for people here in West Virginia.
In addition to coal, West Virginia has an abundance of natural gas. Why shouldn't we use that to generate electricity?
The prices for the gas to fuel power plants has just skyrocketed in recent years, and then it's crashed, and it's skyrocketed, and then it's crashed. And so that, again, leaves West Virginia families and businesses vulnerable to ever skyrocketing electricity prices. Meanwhile, when you look at solar and wind power, the fuel for that electricity is free. It's the wind, it's the sun. And so we could lock ourselves into another generation of an energy source that is polluting and is also going to continue to drive up our electricity bills, and much more of a volatile price for gas than there is for coal, because it's, sold all around the world. Versus, starting to make that move towards wind and solar and storing that clean energy where the fuel is, coming from the heavens, and we can be making and building that clean energy right here at home in West Virginia.
Gas producers will say it's needed to balance out the intermittency of renewables. Are they wrong?
Today, obviously you couldn't turn off every coal and gas plant on the grid today and only count on renewable energy. But over time, I think it's a question of where are we making investments, and are we investing, every dollar that the utilities are investing in new energy resources are ultimately, a lot of them coming back onto our electricity bills. And so do we want those dollars invested, again, in building out the renewable energy and ways to store that renewable energy? Or do we want to build out new gas resources that, again, are going to lock us into a more polluting and volatile source of energy? So, for now, yes, coal and gas are part of the mix that is keeping the lights on, but we're, I think, talking here about how do we plan for the future. And West Virginia is very far behind when it comes to clean energy.
That was Senior Director at Climate Imperative, Mary Ann Hitt, speaking with WVPB's Curtis Tate. Deaths in the coal mining industry hit a nearly decade high last year. This year, the U.S. has seen 8 mining deaths so far, including 4 in West Virginia. Most of those deaths occur in surface mines, which in the U.S. vastly outnumber those that are underground. But as Kentucky Public Radio's Justin Hicks reports, there are a few opportunities to train above-ground miners how to rescue their coworkers.
All right, come on, guys.
On a Wednesday morning before the sun crested the horizon, dozens of miners were already hard at work, searching for survivors in a mine accident. They quickly donned specialized oxygen masks that screech when they turn on.
Check your hoses for leaks. Inhale. Exhale. No leaks present.
This is the National Mine Rescue Contest, held every 2 years. And these miners aren't underground. They're in a downtown convention center in Lexington. Brian Gepfert with the Federal Mine Safety and Health Administration watches off to the side. He says they'll throw all sorts of scenarios at these miners to prepare them for, God forbid, the real deal.
There's usually unaccounted people, fires, unstable ground, water. It's a combination of those different things, and kind of almost like a geometry problem. You're looking at how do you solve this.
It requires a bit of imagination to see these hazards. Curtains and poles symbolize rock walls, and paper signs warn of toxic gas. Missouri miner Steve Stetzer knows it's a far cry from a real mine, but he believes it's still helpful to young miners.
The main thing we'd like to do is get teams under duress, get them tired, get them stressed, because that's when they got to make tough decisions. And tough decisions is the big deal of it.
And there have been a lot of those tough decisions lately. Last year, 40 miners died at work. 3 of those were in Kentucky.
Last year was not the best year for all the mining community.
That's Chris Williamson, head of the Federal Mine Safety Agency. He says he's had lots of meetings with mines and inspectors to stress safety. So far this year, 16 miners have died on the job.
We're over halfway into the year. The number of fatalities have dropped dramatically.
There's still one big problem, though. The vast majority of deaths this year and last have happened at surface mines, not underground ones. And most competitions and trainings are designed for underground rescues. even though 95% of the nation's mines are above ground. Williamson says historically, there's not been as much energy around surface rescue competitions and training, but that's changing.
On the surface side, more and more people are seeing the value of mine rescue and how important it is to have really good teams that you may need to call on.
Right now, the best place for surface mine safety trainings and competitions happens in a place without a single mountain, Florida. Karen Miller manages mine safety there.
We have no underground mines in the state of Florida. Everything is surface mining.
Miller organizes the largest surface mine competition in the country, which is still just a fraction of the size of underground mine competitions. She says it started because their regional mine safety director asked them to lead the way about 5 years ago.
They were like, we've got to do something for surface. They asked us, would you be interested in putting together a mine rescue surface competition?
Instead of focusing on underground worries like venting toxic gas, they focus on things like firefighting, first aid, and rescuing people from vehicles. Miller says she's hoping to start the first ever national surface mine competition next year.
Because that's the only way they're going to learn. Because really the first line of defense is the miners. They need to be.
Miller's surface competition has grown to about 20 rescue teams at the largest. Still, nowhere close to more than 70 rescue teams who are at the underground national competition. But it's a start. I'm Justin Hicks in Lexington.
We've been talking about coal. Most utilities, though, have already shifted from coal to natural gas. And now, some companies and elected officials want to use natural gas to produce hydrogen. Hydrogen is considered a clean fuel, but it's complicated. The federal government is spending billions to build out hydrogen hubs around the country, including one here in Appalachia. But details on that hub are still scarce, and that's got some folks worried. The Allegheny Front's Reed Frazier reports.
At an office park near the West Virginia University campus in Morgantown, U.S. Senator Joe Manchin stood in a line recently with other officials. In his hand, an oversized pair of scissors to cut a ribbon on the Appalachian Regional Clean Hydrogen Hub, or ARCH-2.
Are you ready? Everybody say ARCH-2. ARCH-2.
Manchin had been instrumental in steering federal dollars to his home state for the hydrogen hub through the bipartisan infrastructure law. The law gave the Department of Energy $7 billion to create hubs around the country that would produce and consume hydrogen, a key industrial product that's also on a short list of potential sources of clean energy.
So it's a transition that we're going into. We need horsepower.
Manchin says he fought for and won a hub for the gas-rich area of Appalachia. The hub is a public-private consortium that was awarded up to $925 million from the federal government with projects in West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania.
One of the hubs had to be in Appalachia. It was just common knowledge. If you got the amount of energy that we have available to us, why not be able to produce the energy?
When hydrogen is burned or used in a fuel cell, it emits zero carbon dioxide, the main cause of global warming. Scientists say this makes it a potential climate solution in hard-to-clean-up sectors, like heavy industry or long-haul trucking. Darek Malapragada is an assistant professor of engineering at New York University.
This is where hydrogen comes into play because it provides a carbon-free molecule for delivering energy in applications where electrification may be challenged.
ARCH-2 will produce blue hydrogen. That's where hydrogen is made from natural gas, and the CO2 pollution created during the process is captured and buried in deep underground wells. Companies haven't built many of the pipelines, wells, or storage tanks to do this because it isn't profitable. Malapragada says that's where the hydrogen hubs come in.
And so the government is trying to incentivize deployment of that through these hydrogen hubs.
The hub currently includes nearly a dozen projects that will produce, store, and use hydrogen, though few details have been made public. At a recent community briefing, ARCH-2's program manager, Curtis Hoffman of the consulting firm Battelle, said there's a reason why even basic information, like where projects will be built, remains hard to come by.
A lot of those locations aren't nailed down yet exactly. They're in general areas,
and therefore still need to go through all the proper processes.
Arch 2 officials say more information should be coming soon in the form of open house meetings throughout the project area. But environmental and community advocates say Arch 2's outreach has been lacking. At its latest online public briefing, dozens of people submitted questions on environmental topics, like the impacts of carbon dioxide pipelines and air and water pollution from fracking. Most of these questions went unanswered.
I think they failed that test. I don't think a lot of attendees left feeling reassured or empowered after this briefing.
Tom Torres is with the Ohio River Valley Institute, a think tank that's criticized the hydrogen hub and the natural gas industry. Among those who submitted questions at the briefing was Morgan King with the West Virginia Citizen Action Group. King says she's alarmed how little information about the project has been divulged 2 years after a plan was announced to bring the hub to the region.
That's no surprise. That's the history of Appalachia, of large companies from out of state or from big cities coming in, proposing their projects that will only really benefit shareholders and folks out of state.
King is worried that something packaged as a climate solution will only leave problems for her region. For the Allegheny Front, I'm Reed Frazier.
There's a monthly live storytelling event in Charleston, West Virginia called Three Things, in which guests are asked to talk about their first, their favorite, and their future. It's hosted by Jeff Shirley, who's an associate producer at WVPB's Mountain Stage. Recently, Jeff had Trey Kay, host of the podcast Us and Them, as a guest. Here's an excerpt.
I'll give you the quick rundown of the show. It's very simple. I get three people to come up and tell us about their lives with the three themes of first, favorite, and future. What we hope to get from that is where they come from, what they love about what they do, and where they would like to take it from here. I don't give them hardly any instruction after that, and that usually guarantees that we will get three unique approaches to the task. So we'll get right to it here with our very first guest for the show. I've known her for a long time, and my day job, as some of you know, I work at Mountain Stage, and I remember when, it's years ago, and Bela Fleck and his wife Abigail Washburn were coming on the show, and they said, hey, we need a nonprofit charity they would give a percentage of their merch stuff to for the sales for that show. And they were very specific. They needed a nonprofit that was focused on children and, health needs. So I said, I know exactly that person. So I always felt that was a nice tie into my day job as well. So please welcome the Executive Director of Children's Therapy Clinic to tell us about her first, favorite, and future, Valisha Leary.
Thank you, Jeff. I know when I saw him at Art Walk last month, and I heard him go, Valisha. I said, yeah.
I get that a lot.
And he said, would you do three things? And I said, let me think about it. And then he texted me Monday. He said, what do you think? I said, I think I'm nervous, but I'll do it. So thank you for having me. Thank you all for coming out this evening. As you probably may have read in the program, I went to Marshall University and I majored in education. I planned to be an elementary reading teacher, and I did just that for about 5 years before my husband and I started our family. We had our first daughter, Elizabeth, who is over there, in the fall of 2000. And Elizabeth was born about 7 weeks early. We had been told because she was premature that she may be delayed. And about a year old, she still was delayed, and we asked some more questions. And we were referred to a neurologist, and she was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. So we started her in early intervention, and she received physical, speech, and occupational therapy. We wanted a little bit more, though. So we took her to another place for extra physical therapy. And we were upset and disappointed to know our insurance wouldn't pay for it. They said because she had cerebral palsy, they would not help her learn to walk or learn the things she needed. But if she had hurt herself, broken her leg, they would rehab her. So we were introduced to Children's Therapy Clinic. And I was told about this wonderful place where Elizabeth could go for therapy and we wouldn't have to pay a dime. So she started physical therapy, going to the clinic, and I thought it was just a fabulous place. Like, where else could we get what she needed and it wouldn't be a cost to us? So I started volunteering, asked how I could help, was invited to become a board member that fall.
That's from the Us and Them episode, 3 People, 3 Things, 1 Community. Listen on our website, wvpublic.org. For years, Civil War enthusiasts have reenacted the Battle of Richmond in Kentucky. Organizers bill the event as a chance to get a taste of what life might have been like for some in the mid-1800s. For the last 3 years, the reenactment has also included baseball, as it was played more than 150 years ago. WEKU's John McGarry has this.
In a way, it's a contest between North and South. The Cincinnati Red Stockings are about to play the Georgetown Gentlemen in a game of vintage baseball, 2 words, under 1869 rules. During warm-ups, Red Stockings captain Chris Draft Pelly, who will be the first baseman today, explains a few of the rules.
We're playing fly rule, which you got to catch it on the fly. There's also some rules around bound rule. And the bound rules, if it bounces once, anytime in the field or in foul territory, and someone catches it on one bounce, you're out.
They use vintage baseballs the old-timers called lemon peels, pitched underhand from 45 feet, and thick-handled vintage bats to strike them. Most notably, they don't wear gloves. How do you manage that?
Carefully.
Pelly says his vintage baseball injuries include a dislocated ring finger on one hand and a broken index finger on the other. Fellow first baseman Matt Cornbread Dunn of the Georgetown Gentlemen acknowledges line drives leave fielders with a choice.
It separates the wheat from the chaff, I'll say that. We've had some guys that thought they wanted to play third or short until they got the first one hit at them. Talking to gets out of the way all the time. Yeah.
All the Georgetown players have nicknames. Asked about the origin of his, Dunn says he guesses it's because he likes cornbread. Aside from the different rules and different equipment, or lack thereof, something else separates vintage baseball from modern sports: a gentlemanly approach by both squads. Cornbread explains.
I love it. I've always loved baseball, but as I've matured through life, it's gotten a little harder to play it the other way. So this is our speed, and I have a good time with it. And it's also fun just to be with a bunch of good guys, and all the teams we play are truly gentlemen.
The Gentlemen and Red Stockings play to win, but there's no razzing of opponents, and not once is the pitcher compared to a belly itcher. It's the 3rd consecutive year the battlefield has hosted a game of vintage baseball. The first year, the Gentlemen won. Last year, the Red Stockings squared the count.
On behalf of the Battlefield Association, play ball! Here we go. Let's go.
The rubber match is on. There are no balls and strikes, so the batter can wait for a good pitch. When a fielder grabs one, it's usually thrown so it can be caught on the bounce to protect hands. While his team bats, the Gentleman catcher Daniel Noodle Baird is asked about the prospect of a foul ball struck backwards with no equipment to protect him.
We try not to think about it, right? It's like you don't think about the bad things that can happen just because it's so much fun.
A rope separates the field of play from the 100 or so fans in attendance. Just behind it is retired English teacher Mason Smith and wife Marie Mitchell, both fans of vintage baseball. On his lap are a sketchbook and watercolor set. The one we're looking at now, it's a pitcher and the batter. How long did that take you to produce?
The rough sketch is very rough. It probably took about 2 minutes, and then putting watercolor washes behind it, another 5 or 10. So this is a very quick sketch.
Smith says he'll produce 3 or 4 before the battle reenactment begins. Back on the field, Cornbread smashes the old lemon peel over the left fielder's head, knocking in a run. What happens next depends on whom you talk to.
I was hoping it wouldn't go that far, so I had to run so far. I'm pretty much a pull hitter.
So you got a triple and then came home when they sort of messed up the throw?
No, we call that a home run. We don't call that a triple and dance on the throw. That's a home run. Our official scored that a home run.
Despite Cornbread's wallop, the Red Stockings triumph in 10 innings, 18-17. Looking on is Paula White, who arrived early for a good seat to watch an old game played by the young at heart.
It's different. It's like my neighbor said, it's like playing baseball when we were kids.
At the Battle of Richmond, I'm John McGarry.
Not every competition takes place on a field. Like, for example, the USA Mullet Championships. You know the mullet. Short on the top and sides, long in the back. The Kentucky waterfall. The Tennessee top hat. The hockey player haircut. Business up top, party in the back. Well, a 6-year-old from Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, recently won first place for his age group at the Mullet Championships. WVIA's Haley O'Brien has more.
Camden Cunningham says winning first place is
super big.
The USA Mullet Championships not only highlights the classic American hairstyle, but raises money for a nonprofit that builds houses for wounded veterans. It's called Jared Allen's Homes for Wounded Warriors. Camden raised more than $6,000 for the cause as he garnered votes. Here's his mom, Kelsey Cunningham.
Just his personality kind of took the world by storm, and even people from all over in different states, they were telling us that they absolutely love his personality.
The top prize includes a custom Mullet Championship belt, a GoPro camera, and $5,000 cash. What does he plan to do with that money?
Probably go to Disney.
I'm Haley O'Brien.
Congratulations to Camden and to all the competitors in this year's Mullet Championship. In the words of the Beastie Boys, number 1 on the side and don't touch the back. Number 6 on the top and don't cut it whack, Jack. Till next time, thanks for joining us as we journey throughout Appalachia. Our theme music is by Matt Jackford. Other music this week was provided by Kaya Cater, Joe Dobbs and the 1937 Flood, Jeff Ellis, John Ingram, Jerry Milnes, and Blue Dot Sessions. Bill Lynch is our producer. Xander Alloy is our associate producer. Our executive producer is Eric Douglas. Kelly Libby is our editor. Our audio mixer is Patrick Stevens. We had help this week from Folkways editor Chris Chulin. You can find us on Instagram @InAppalachia. You can also send us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org. Visit wvpublic.org/InsideAppalachia to subscribe or stream all of our stories. Or look for Inside Appalachia on your favorite podcast app. Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, offering 31 bachelor-level degrees and 6 master-level degrees for students of any age. More information at concord.edu.